Hi, I'm Sarah Mueller, a reporter with Forbes. I'm sitting down today with presidential hopeful Perry Johnson. And Perry, you have some exciting news from this weekend. You qualified for the debate stage. You've reached all of their requirements. What are you most excited for Milwaukee?
Getting a chance to actually tell my story because let's face it, my theme has always been on the economy. And I had two major issues that I was always focusing on: the economy and the border. And I get an opportunity to let people know exactly where I stand. Let's face it, right now we are $33 trillion in debt. When I wrote the book, 2 Cents to Save America, I was already putting it at 32, but I guess now we're up to 33. And considering that we only collect 4.9 trillion in taxes each year, and you end up having more debt by what, sevenfold than you collect in taxes each year, I'd say it's not good. And it's costing every single American $610 a month in interest payments on that debt. And in fact, what they're talking about now, you'll notice they want to reduce Social Security by $17,000 to $23,000 a year per couple. And why is that? Because the government has taken all that money that people have put in for Social Security and spent it in other things, effectively stealing from Social Security in order to fund the government. And the reason we have inflation, the reason you're paying double for gas than you should, the reason you're spending all this money for food and housing, it's because of the government. The government threw an extra $4.5 trillion into the economy without providing goods and services. And so we suddenly have a disaster on our hands. And yet, at a time when defense is so crucial, we are literally sending $140 billion to the Ukraine to fight the Ukraine war. And what's important about this isn't just the $140 billion. They have no accounting for where that money is going. And when we tried to pass a law for that accounting, it did not pass Congress. So they just do with that 140 billion whatever they want. And unfortunately, that is not the way to work a government. So in my plan, 2 Cents to Save America, instead of having the government spend every penny in their budget every year, we're going to do just the opposite. We're going to freeze the budget and cut 2 cents out of every dollar of discretionary spending. And we're going to incentivize the people to actually spend less money, because in that way, we have an opportunity to change the way the government is going. Instead of going bankrupt, we'll be actually to start having a government that gives quality and efficiency. And what I've done all my life, I've essentially spent my life bringing quality and efficiency to companies. And that's what my companies do. They literally go to companies, find a way for these companies to be more successful by having better quality and producing things at a lower cost. And in the end, I think we need that for the federal government.
Now, you've got quite the 2 cents plan that we've heard numerous times. I want to, for those who don't know, I want to quickly cover the credentials to make the debate stage Wednesday night. You must have 40,000 donors with at least 220 different states. And then for polling, candidates either have to have 1% in 3 national polls to meet the RNC's requirements, or 1% in 2 national polls and 1% in 2 polls from the separate early states. Now, my question for you is that there's been some debate on the validity of the polls that helped you cross that final threshold. There's one that's specifically been questioned about the methodology, and the other that's a very small national poll. Have these polls been accepted by the GOP for their polling requirements?
I believe so. I don't see any reason why they would not. You're talking about the 2 of the polls were Trafalgar, right? Trafalgar, I believe, has the most accurate information on polling of any polling organization in the country. So if you look at the last 2 races, they were number 1 in their accuracy in polling. Now, they did a poll of Iowa and New Hampshire, and they did a poll nationally. And in those polls, clearly I hit the mark. I'm not really familiar with all the different polling organizations, but I believe you have, the other one is a Victory Insight. I'm not familiar with that organization. I do know that they did poll me over 1%. I think we'll have another poll coming out. Isn't McLaughlin coming out today?
We have a couple more coming out here in the next like 24 to 48 hours. So some of us are running up against the gun, to figure out who's going to actually make the debate stage. Now, off of that, we have potentially up to 10 people taking the debate stage with you. Who are you most excited to have discourse with about policy change?
Well, when I'm going there, my goal is actually to get my plan actually discussed and heard. Because right now, who am I going to discuss it with? Let's face it, nobody else has a plan. So we're 5 months from the Iowa caucus. What I find amazing is that there is no one else on the debate stage that even has a plan to solve our problem. And I wrote a book on this quite a while ago, and I've been really promulgating this plan. So I think my main goal has to be just to let people know who I am and about my plan, because I have spent my life trying to be insulated. In fact, I wouldn't even let my kids on Facebook because I thought it was much safer to not be exposed, because I already got a lot of exposure just because of the fact that I was the quality guru. So unless you're dealing with that very unique group, essentially the CEOs of companies or the people in that business of trying to bring quality and efficiency to their companies, they wouldn't really have known about me. So right now, I think it's my job to let people know about me and what I've been doing and get a feel for me, because let's face it, if you're going to elect somebody to be president, you ought to at least know something about them. And ought to know something about their plan, what they've done, and their credentials. And then bottom line, do they like you? Now, I made a reality series, and in that reality series, we go through exactly what went on. As you probably know, we managed to meet the polling requirement despite the fact that over 50% of the people would not include me in the polls. So that meant that despite the fact that I had all of this adversity, I got virtually no media attention. We still managed to make it. And that's the great thing about America. In America, you have to find a way to make it, even with the obstacles. And that has really been the key to success of our great country, because in America, anything is possible. And I'm on stage, and I'm a perfect example of that. A guy is coming from obscurity, literally, who's tried to be obscure his whole life, to suddenly running for the highest office in the land. But yet, here we are on the debate stage and getting an opportunity for all of America to hear a basic plan. And with the reality series, they see the struggles you go through, because in politics, things move at lightning speed. And they'll have an opportunity to see what goes on. I am on Newsmax every Sunday from 9 to 9:30, Perry Johnson in prime time. And you can see the past episodes by going to perryjohnson.com/backstage, and you can see everything that's gone on. And believe me, it has been really something. And we just got confirmation we have 54,000 donors. And that was from Aristotle. That is being sent into the RNC right now.
You're already working on passing the threshold for the next debate stage. Let's talk a little bit about polling of where you're at now. The big one that was released here in Iowa today was the Des Moines Register NBC Mediacom Iowa poll, released at about 5 a.m. this morning. We've got Donald Trump at 42%. We've got Ron DeSantis at 19%, Tim Scott at 9%. We have a couple others, but what's mentioned here is that there are numerous people with 0% who it's not less than 1%, because maybe they had some votes that didn't match up to 1%, but there were specifically people who had no votes, and you were on that list. How do you feel like that conveys to your current campaign, given that you are coming from, out of nowhere and you're trying to get that name recognition?
They had a poll in the Des Moines Registrar, you're saying? I didn't know about that came out today, and I had 0 votes?
Yes. So they had some candidates where they mentioned it was 0% because it was lower than 1%, but they still had some votes. And among the list of people who had no votes were Larry Elder, Asa Hutchinson, and you.
Really does surprise me. What was the sample size?
I do not have it in front of me right now, but it was all polling at the Iowa State Fair.
Polling, okay. So I don't know. They had a straw poll at the Iowa State Fair. I don't even know how we did there.
Wrapping this back up, how do you expect to catch up to those front runners when the race is so dense and you're trying to get that name recognition?
Everything starts on the debate stage. I don't think anyone doubts that. All the stuff leading up to that, basically you're getting on the ballot. And the race for the nomination actually starts on the stage. Now, I am surprised that I did not get any votes, but I would need to know the population that was sampled. If they sample like 400 people, it doesn't mean much, particularly if they've sampled them at the state fair. I say that because in Iowa, we have only worked with the caucus. So if you're talking about the state fair, you have people coming from all over. And then on top of that, if you have people from the state fair, the percentage of people that are caucus goers is diminutive, because you only have, of the people going to the Iowa State Fair, what, half the people are from Iowa, half are not. I don't even know if it's that high. It might be, you'd have to look at the stats. I think it might be 35% are actually from Iowa, 65% are not. And then you have to also factor in the number of people that are in the caucus in Iowa only represent 5% of the population. And because of the fact that you're working with the primary, our entire focus has been for the caucus goers. So the only thing that would make sense is actually to survey caucus goers or potential caucus goers. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense for the primary in Iowa. It's not like New Hampshire. New Hampshire, everybody votes. In Iowa, the only people that vote are the people in the Republican caucus.
So just for reference, the Des Moines Register poll that came out was 406 polled Republican caucus goers that was conducted between August 13th and 17th. And it has a plus or minus 4.9 percentage points. Margin of error.
Pretty high. Even you have to admit that. That's really 4.9% is really high.
But even if we compare some of these,
you could have a person at 4.9% and get a 0.
But even if we compare some of these to other polls, it still has a very similar ranking when you have people like Donald Trump and DeSantis polling very high up. I come back to, when you're taking the debate stage, what is going to be your strategy trying to get that face time when you're sharing the stage with so many other people who are also trying to share their plans?
The strategy is to tell my plan. I think the only way that you're going to win people over is for them to get to know you. And what you have is a group of people that at this point don't know me yet. And I at least have an opportunity to present my plan and see whether or not they care. I think America does care about whether or not they are going to still be a formidable force in the future. And I think America does care about their kids. And right now you have a situation where the whole future of the country is literally at stake. When you have the government in this massive spending spree, where they are literally spending the country into oblivion, we are now spending at 130% of gross domestic product. Now that is absurd. And it puts everything at risk. Don't we want our children to have the same opportunities that we had? I mean, I live the American dream. I'm a guy that started with nothing. But because I live in a country where anything is possible, I'm able to have this idyllic life. And I want that for my kids, and I want that for my kids' kids. And the only future that we have is a future that we make. And for us to destroy the country by this craziness that's going on doesn't make any sense. And I think America does understand that you can't constantly be reckless. And the recklessness of our spending is putting the entire country at risk. Think about how important it is that we have a good Department of Defense. Right now, you have China that has gone from a $1 trillion, $200 billion economy in the year 2000 to a $20 trillion economy today. And they are building up their armaments. They're threatening to take over Taiwan. They're in a position right now where they're spending and building up that military, and they have the technology. We were literally 800% larger than they were in the year 2000. Now we're only 25% larger than they are. And if we don't stay on top of our technology in defense, particularly with artificial intelligence entering the picture, our whole country is at risk. Our way of life is at risk. And when you have to actually borrow money from China in order for us to pay our bills, something's wrong. So I say we have to start recognizing that it's time for us to try to get Yankee frugal in our government. And it's not. It's reckless. And we have to stop it. I think my message will resonate. But people haven't heard my message because really they've had no chance. But they will have that opportunity on that debate stage. And frankly, I think I'll win them over.
Now, you're a businessman. Let me talk in some business terms real quick. What is your KPI for the debate? And what do you want to see your poll numbers to be a week after the debate stage?
I hope they rise. Right now, I would say I'm probably about 1% across the country. That's about what it took to make the debate stage. So you have some polls that had me at 1.6. You had polls that didn't count. I got a kick out of the Monmouth poll. Monmouth poll was, the only reason I was included was that was a blind poll. And blind poll meant that they didn't give you any names. So you just had to choose your presidential candidate. And because 9 people were actually mentioned, there were 9 people in that poll, and I was one of 9. Now, there were 6 others that weren't mentioned, so they got all 0. There might have been 6 or 7. It's interesting that despite the fact that I got 1% in that poll, that the other pollsters still never included my name. They included the names of the people under me, but they didn't include me. But it didn't matter. I ended up getting on anyway. But I think right now, nationally, I'm probably about 1%. Maybe I'm 1.1, 1.2. It depends. It all depends on the polling and the groups and where you're strong, where you're not. But that polling is really regulated by media, because if the media doesn't cover you, they don't know about you. And now's an opportunity to actually get my voice heard. And for the first time, I will have an opportunity to speak to the public, because we'll have a substantial viewing audience and we'll have reporters there. And this time they will actually hear about my 2-cent plan. And I think that will resonate. My goal is to try to get to a higher number, because I know I need 3% within about the next 4.5, 5 weeks after that to make the next debate.
Now, before I let you go, obviously the big conversation as of last night when we're recording this is that Donald Trump said that he will not be taking the debate stage. And instead, some reports say that he will actually be doing an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. What are your thoughts on him not joining the other GOP candidates on the debate stage Wednesday night?
From my point of view, I'm just as happy. Let's face it. Donald Trump would take up all the oxygen. If you want to get in the real world right now, let's be realistic about this. You take a look at every candidate there. I will even include DeSantis in that. But every candidate is a long shot compared to Donald Trump right now, because he's been polling at what, 52 to 69%? It depends on how many indictments he gets. Every time he gets another indictment, he tends to go up in the polls. And right now, from a practical point of view, we're sitting over there with everybody on that stage is essentially a long shot. DeSantis at one point, I think, was actually ahead of Trump briefly. This was a few months ago. I think he got up to what, 40%? But bottom line is he's now down in the teens. And we have to see what happens. I think what we have to do right now is go out there, state our position, let people know why they should elect you, and get people to actually know these candidates. And right now, it's a golden opportunity. And actually, I think having Donald Trump not there is overwhelmingly to my benefit.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you've got a lot to do to get ready for Wednesday night. And thank you for joining us on Eye on Iowa.